Hey, Indy fans, Joe here. Quick note, right after Keith and I recorded the latest Further Adventures segment, we got a very nice anniversary greeting through the email from Chris Allen, IJN UK's Chris Allen. Very nice of him to send that along, but we didn't have a chance to get it in the segment proper when we recorded, but I wanted to make sure that we got that to you. So, big thanks to Chris for sending the anniversary greeting along. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to your Sargasso Pirates review coming in. So here is that anniversary greeting from Chris, and then Keith and I will bring you the latest Further Adventures of Indiana Jones.
A British tar is a soaring soul, as free as a mountain bud.
No time for the 7-year itch, Dr. Jones. Hi, Joe and Keith. This is Chris here from the UK, calling from across the pond to wish you and the Further Adventures a very happy 7th anniversary from IJ in the UK. Did you know that a very big part of the inspiration to attempt my own IndyCast segment was listening to your banter across the original run of Marvel Further Adventure comics? Now, that's either a compliment or an insult, depending on your opinion of IJ in the UK, I know. But not only that, I'm always in awe of the interviews with the original Marvel makers you've been able to track down. I mean, you even shed light on the mysterious issue 35. After 7 great years, I'm sure everyone is saying to you both, it's not the years, but the mileage. And it's true, you guys have both made up a lot of miles across the pages of Indy's comic papers. But I'm personally looking forward to tuning in to the Further Adventures of Joe and Keith, exploring the Indy comic verse. So count me in when you catch up with the Dark Horse Digest from 2008 and 9, and of course the Star Wars Tales issue 19, Into the Great Unknown. You go first, guys. Have a great time celebrating, Joe and Keith. This is Chris here from the UK, signing off.
Stanley presents, oh hey, that's me, the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. Excelsior. Welcome.
It's time for the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones.
Some of the greatest adventures of my life are sitting in this museum.
Big deal.
Pack your bag, grab your passport, and prepare to go globetrotting with Dark Horse Comics' classic 4-color adventures of Indiana Jones.
Oh, your teacher.
Part-time.
Mr. Henry Jones, Jr. of Princeton, New Jersey.
I like Indiana.
We named the dog Indiana.
Now, what shall we talk about?
Welcome, IndyCast listeners and Further fans, to the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. I am Joe Stuber, and joining me as always is Keith Voss. Keith, are you ready to celebrate today?
Just today? I'm always ready to celebrate, Joe. But today,
it's always a celebration.
It's always a celebration. You know, I got my bottle of Kraken Black Spiced rum, since we're going to be talking about a certain Indiana Jones story soon. But, you know, that's not exactly what we're celebrating today. What we are celebrating is 7 years of the Further Adventures of Indiana Jones on the IndyCast. I mean, unbelievable. It's our 7th anniversary. We premiered this segment on the IndyCast June 13th, 2011.
It's not the years, it's the mileage. It's not the mileage. It's the year. It's both of them.
It's both. It's both.
Feels so old.
It's been an absolute wonderful ride. You know, really a great thing to be part of the IndyCast and be able to talk comic books with you and talk Indiana Jones with you. And, you know, for all the books that we've talked about and all the people that we've interviewed, this is amazing. We always try to promise, you know, a great show for the fans, for the listeners, for the fans of the books in the series. But you know what? That's not the only thing we've been promising.
No, we've been promising Sargasso Pirates for a while now. And again, thank you so much for doing this segment with me. I can't imagine doing this, you know, with anyone else. This is just, it's been fun. For anybody that does want to go back and check out our premiere on the IndyCast, by the way, Keith and I posted that, our first episode there. Our voices are so horrible. Well, yours is good. Mine's horrible.
It's amazing. And, you know, we are going to talk about Sargasso Pirates, but you are the captain of this ship, Joe. You're the one that steers it. You get the guests. You put it together. I'm just here to talk all things.
You're the knowledge man. You're the deep dive comic book guy, man. You know so much of these things, but look, it's fun. We're enjoying it. Again, thanks to Ed Dollista. So glad we got to meet up this past year as well. But you're right. We've been promising Sargasso Pirates for a while now. Took a little bit of a detour on our last segment. It was the 10th anniversary of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. We had to do something with that.
touch on that. We had to. I mean,
yeah. And what a celebration that was. So 10 years of Crystal Skull. We got our interview with John Jackson Miller, who did the comic book adaptation. So that was fun. If you have a chance, if you haven't heard it, go back and check that out. Today, though, we are getting to Sargasso Pirates. We're hitting the high seas, man. It's the 4-issue Dark Horse miniseries. It was published December 95 through March of 96. It's going to be a fun one.
That's right, but the origins of this indie tale go back even further than that, as you find out when we talk to our special guest today. He's at the VIP table in the Raven's Nest, ready to talk indie, talk Sargasso Pirates, help us celebrate 7 years of further adventures on the IndyCast. Today, we're sitting down with the author and the artist of Indiana Jones and the Sargasso Pirates, Mr. Karl Kesel.
Oh my goodness! This is look. Can you think of a better way to celebrate today? This is we're getting so many guests on the Raven's Nest. This is so much fun. And we talk about Karl Kesel. He has not only spent time in the Indieverse, we're so glad he did, but he has worked on some of the biggest titles in the biz: Superman, Superboy, Harley Quinn, Hawk and Dove, Spider-Man, one of your favorites, Daredevil. Yes, of course, you're the Daredevil guy, man. Fantastic Four, you name it. So much to talk about with Karl today. So Keith, look, we've got the rum, we've got everything, we've got the Raven's Nest. Let's head on inside the Raven's Nest to sit down with Karl Kesel. All right, well, joining us now on this very special occasion is an accomplished writer and artist. He has worked on some of the biggest titles for both DC and Marvel, and he created some of the coolest characters in the Indiana Jones Dark Horse comic book universe. A big welcome to Karl Kesel. Karl, welcome to the IndyCast and welcome to the Raven's Nest.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.
Now, before we hit the high seas with the Sargasso Pirates, I do want to get into a couple of other characters that you worked on. There's something that's coming up here very soon. Keith and I wanted to ask you about your reboot in the 80s with your then wife for Hawk and Dove. Uh-huh. Okay, Hawk and Dove are coming back in a big way right now.
Yeah, they are.
They're kind of the live action thing. First of all, Titans. That's going to be on this DC streaming service. They're going to be two of the characters on there. We don't know. Do we know when we're going to see this? And have you seen it already, the live action version?
No, I certainly am not in the loop on this. I mean, quite honestly, it's like through Facebook fans that send me information that I learn about it. So
okay, can you give us a little bit of background with your character, how you and your wife had sort of rebooted? Because this is good. I think this is the 60th anniversary of the characters themselves, but you tweaked. Yeah, I think it was it 68? I think they. Does that make sense? Is my math right? 58, maybe. 58, no, I think. Yeah.
50. I mean, 68, Summer of Love, Hawk and Dove. I bet you that's right.
Oh, 50 year. Okay, so 50-year anniversary, and then you guys kind of tweaked it in what, like 86, around 86?
It was 88. Actually, Rob Liefeld just posted last week that it was the 30th anniversary of the release of the first issue of the miniseries.
Wow.
So it was almost exactly 30 years ago to the week that reboot of Hawk and Dove came out.
Unbelievable.
How did you get involved in that series? Give us a look for those that aren't familiar, because these aren't like, it's not like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the big three. Kind of give us a little bit of background maybe on the characters, and then because this is your version, what's coming up, the live action is your tweaked version, right? Your rebooted version.
Yeah, I believe so. Obviously, they're using the Dove that Barbara and I introduced. Yeah.
Okay.
So and Rob Liefeld, I don't mean to short Rob, but yeah, I mean, basically, Hawk and Dove was created in the 60s, clearly out of, the phrase Hawk and Dove was prominent in the 60s, referring to hawks who were pro-Vietnam War, doves who were anti. And DC, with Steve Ditko, came out with a book called Hawk and Dove. Hawk, very militaristic, very aggressive character. Dove, always trying to solve things in a non-violent way. And you could pretty well tell where Ditko's sympathies lied, because Dove was pretty damn ineffectual in that series. And so ineffectual, obviously, that when DC later on did the Crisis on Infinite Earths, they killed Dove.
He didn't make it. Yeah, I was going to say he didn't make it out. They killed
quite honestly, I hate to say it, but I don't think anyone really missed him. And I was lucky enough to be inking the History of the DC Universe, penciled by George Perez, and I was inking the double-page spread, which was about Crisis on Infinite Earths. and they had a little montage of the dead heroes, and Dove was there, and I was like inking Dove, and I was going, no, Dove, that name, this light blue costume, it really should have been a woman. This really should have been a woman. And like that, like just clicked in my head. And I was with Barbara at the time, and I mentioned it to her, and she goes like, we should like pitch this. And so that's how the ball started rolling. And DC saw some potential there and gave us the heads up to go with a mini series. And Barbara was the one who brought in this new kid no one had ever heard of called Rob Liefeld. And
whatever happened to him?
Yeah, whatever did happen to him, So, no, I mean, that was the start of it. And our whole take was, that we did steer the characters away from just peace and war and more towards chaos and order, which gave Dove a more she had a more active role and a more positive role to play in the team with that approach.
Okay. And this, in the Titans TV series, they're going to be played by Alan Ritchson, who is Smallville's Aquaman, so he gets to do some more superheroes.
Yeah.
And also, Minka Kelly is going to play Dawn Granger. Is there anything you're expecting to see in the new series? Anything you want to see in the new series?
I can't say I have any expectations. I'm hoping it's going to be great. I think, from what I've seen, both are excellent casting for the characters, so I'm very excited.
Very cool. Well, you mentioned earlier about inking. What inspired you to actually get into art in the first place and into inking comics?
Well, I basically, the short version is in 1969, I was 10 years old, and my family drove cross country for the whole summer vacation. We drove all the way across the United States and back. It took a whole month of our summer. And when you're 10 years old, sitting in a car for 10 hours a day, it's damn boring. And
no iPad? What was
No, there's no iPad.
No smartphone? No.
Of course, you're driving, so when you have to stop, you have to stop at gas stations. And what did gas stations have at the time? Comic books.
Yeah,
they had spinner racks. And I would just grab some comics and read. And by the end of that month, I was hooked. I really wanted to become a cartoonist. And quite honestly, since I was about 10 years old, that's all I've ever wanted to be.
So what were you picking up and reading out of those gas stations?
Oh, well, like the Roy Thomas Neal Adams X-Men with Sauron.
Great.
Great. I was, picking up some Jack Kirby Fantastic Fours in the 80s. I believe, the whole Doctor Doom Prisoner storyline, which I was amazed by. That was
great time to get into comics right there.
Yeah, and the Spider-Man storyline was that whole stone tablet storyline, which, when you look at it, went on for 18 issues, which was unheard of back then.
Yeah.
That was the cool thing about Marvel, I think, was that they had those sort of serialized storylines. I think that's what set them apart so much, was that they did hook the readers back in month after month.
Yeah, but the thing, as a kid, I have to tell you, that Spider-Man story, it was structured so I didn't realize at first it was constantly all about this stone tablet because, the Lizard came and then the Shocker came and then Kingpin came in and it took me, I was 10 years old, remember, it took me a while to realize, wait, this tablet story, it hasn't been resolved because they kept resolving the Lizard story. They kept resolving the Shocker story. So there was a sense of completion so it was a very sneaky way to have an extremely long story.
You're known primarily in your early career for inking. Was that just a sort of a get my foot in the door kind of thing, or had you seen something about inkers that you realized that you could sort of take what the penciler had done and then put your own spin on it? What was the fascination with inking?
Well, I will say a college roommate of mine was looking at my art, and he just said at one point, he goes, I love your ink line. And I'd never even thought about being an inker until that moment. And but I will admit, I like many people have a problem with the blank page. I just don't really quite see it in my head. And so as much as I would like to be a penciler, I just don't. I seem to be missing some key ingredients there. And but inking is a lot of fun for me. I enjoy. It sounds so stupid, but I enjoy the feel of the ink going on the paper. It's a very tactile experience. And once my friend pointed that out to me, I really focused on being an inker. I thought it was probably my easiest way into the industry. And almost, I moved to New York City in January of one year, I think it was 83. And by December of '83, I was working full time as an inker. So
interesting that you mentioned December '83 because Keith, we're going to be talking. Look, two of our favorites, Fate of Atlantis and Sargasso Pirates. We're going to be talking about that.
Absolutely.
I think we need to go back a little bit with Mr. Kesel. Was your first published work inking Cary Gamble's Indiana Jones?
Yes, it was.
In December of 19. Did we just do a deep cut there? What was that?
Yeah, Marvel Fanfare, is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Marvel Age number 9. It was Marvel Age number 9. It was
Marvel Age number 9.
A section in the back called New Talent Department. This up-and-coming inker named Karl Kesel. Do you remember this?
Oh, I do remember it. I remember it really well.
Okay.
It was, first of all, I was just inking what they were giving out as samples, but I loved Indiana Jones, and Cary's stuff was so beautiful. Yeah. And it was a fun page to ink. It took forever, but it was a fun page to ink. And Joe Rubinstein, I know, reviewed it and said that I if everything lined up, I should be working professionally in 6 months. And he hit it almost exactly on the nose. Within 6 months, I was working at DC full time.
What was it like to kind of... Oh, go ahead, Keith.
No, so I was going to say that's a great piece of artwork, which we actually do have. And with Mr. Kesel's permission, we would love to put that on the Further Adventures Facebook page at one point.
Please do.
So everybody can see that because it is it's amazing. It's something I had actually never seen before until right before this interview. And it just blew my mind that we dig
deep here on Further Adventures.
We got some cool stuff on that page. So this is just going to add to that. Just like really, like, you talk about Indy, Bill Lawton in your Sargasso Pirates story calls Indy the digger the whole time. We're diggers. I mean, we're diggers. Like, so the fact that we found that we were able to get these and able to share them with everybody, this is just another little piece of indie history for us.
And full disclosure, big thanks to Michael Urey and Back Issue Magazine because they did do an article a while back on Indiana Jones comics. And they had a lot of that stuff in there. So, digging deep on that. But credit where credit is due to Back Issue Magazine for finding that up for us.
Absolutely.
So let's get into this then. And look, how did you get into the world of Indiana? Well, that was your first dip into the Indiana Jones universe. But ultimately, how did you become involved with Dark Horse and Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis?
Eventually, I moved to Portland, Oregon, lived in Portland, Oregon, and at some point, and I can't remember, I believe at this point, Barbara was working at Dark Horse by the time they were doing the Indiana Jones books. But anyways, I obviously knew the people at Dark Horse, and we had talked around the edges about me doing some work for them. And one day Mike Richardson called me up and he said, "We've got Indiana Jones. How would you like to work on it?" And Mike has many fine abilities, but probably his secret superpower is he knows exactly what buttons to push with people. And I was jumping up and down. I would love to work on Indiana Jones. And, so we had a lunch and he explained that, he had Dan Barry on his penciler. He was looking for someone to ink it. And William Mesner-Loebs was writing. And, it was just such a great team. And I was lucky enough to be invited to join. And so I did.
Excellent. So, you're obviously an Indiana Jones fan.
Yes.
And so what kind of what was the starting point for you with Indiana Jones? Did you see Raiders in the theater? What really prompted this love for the character that translated over so well to Dark Horse's pages?
Well, obviously, I did see the Raiders in the theater. I probably saw it 5-7 times in the theater, and it just hit all the buttons of things I love. It was exciting. It was funny without being a comedy. I love that there's moments of humor that break up drama.
Yes.
And it had a real touching heart to it. It had real heart to it. I like that Indiana Jones was capable, but he wasn't a Superman. I like that he had to work to win. And you always, obviously we know Indiana Jones is going to survive, but there's always that moment where you think, maybe he's not going to survive this. Maybe he's not going to survive this.
Or just how is he going to get out of this?
How? Exactly.
How is he going to do it? And you're along for the ride. And that's what I love so much about the character. It's of course he's going to survive. But the fun part is going along for the ride with him, which is something I feel that you did so well on Sargasso Pirates.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, this is the sort of thing that really is near and dear to my heart. Is I'm a much bigger fan of adventure than I am of superheroes, and so Indiana Jones is pure adventure. There's no doubt about it. Dan Barry. I really enjoyed inking. It was a real honor to ink him, but Dan had very distinct ideas about this series, and quite honestly, he slowly forced Bill Loebs and myself off the series. I'm sorry to say.
Just going over Dan's pencils, what was your thought process? Because the resume for Dan goes back forever. And I mean, he was a legend in the business. When you were going over, how did you see the pencils, and what were you able to bring to it as the inker?
Well, Dan, his history is in comic strips, obviously, especially on the Flash Gordon Daily, and I am a huge fan of old comic strips, the adventure comic strips. My one of my biggest idols in comics is Milton Caniff, and I think Terry and the Pirates is probably the best comic strip and probably one of the best comics ever done. And a lot of my inking is brush inking, which I get from Caniff. So the idea that I could actually pull out some of my Caniff tricks on Indiana Jones, which I felt was fitting for both Dan's style and for the character, this was, really a dream come true for me, because there's not a lot of use for Caniff-style techniques in the superhero universe.
What does that mean?
Well, there's a way Caniff does folds on clothing. He's very big on drapery, very big on shadows, a lot of texture work. It's very lush work. And if you really get into it, he's also a master of implying things without fully drawing them. And I'm certainly not good at that, but it's one of the things I admire about him. If you look at some of his best work on Steve Canyon and Terry and the Pirates, you realize that really, that Oriental background back there, it's really just kind of squiggles and splots of ink, and it is the implication of buildings or furniture, but really it isn't really that exactly drawn. But what that does is make the characters, which are drawn really distinctly, the focus of the panel, it's almost like putting the background out of focus. Mm-hmm. He's a master at that.
So this was 1991. Was it around this time that Sargasso Pirates kind of has its genesis? Because we know it didn't get printed until 95.
Yeah, it must have been around then. I mean, while we were working on Sargasso, or while we were working on Fate of Atlantis, somewhere in there, I convinced Mike to let me have a shot at a solo. At the time, it was really going to be a solo Indiana Jones series that I could write and pencil and ink myself, and so I'm sure that if not. And quite honestly, it could very well be. You would have to ask Mike Richardson, but it could very well be that the idea that things didn't work out exactly smoothly on Fate of Atlantis might have made Mike feel he kind of owed me something. I'm not sure. I like to think my talent had something to do with it too. But
I think it did.
Whatever reason, Mike decided to take a gamble on me writing, penciling, and inking an Indiana Jones miniseries. I was thrilled by this, and. It's hard to believe, but I believe I was the first person working on an Indiana Jones miniseries to follow Fate of Atlantis. But then something happened called the death of Superman, and it really derailed my work on Indiana Jones.
By the way, Keith, we're going to be talking about Sargasso Pirates here. I think it's appropriate that we get a bottle of spiced rum for the table.
Yeah, I gotta. Yeah, I think that's in order. We need to order.
And drinks on the house, right? Drinks on the house.
Spiced rum, some Kraken for everybody.
I don't know how we make money in this place, because we did drinks on the house the last time for Crystal Skull's 10th. I don't know how we're making any money, but it seems appropriate as we talk about. But yeah, Keith, go for it, because we'll get in a little bit of Superman chat here too.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask quickly about Sargasso Pirates, going back into how you developed the story, because one thing I really found fascinating, and something I love about the Indiana Jones series of films, is they always allude to some type of other adventure that Indy had in the movies, back in he was a secret agent with Mac, and all these little stories kind of get alluded to and not really touched on throughout a line or two of dialogue. And what I love about Sargasso Pirates is the fact that Bill Lawton, our fantastic villain of the book, was the guy that picked Indy up after he jumped ship in the beginning of Last Crusade. I absolutely love that. This is the guy that rescued Indy.
That's my favorite part of the book. Absolutely.
I thought that was fantastic, because you're always wondering, like, what is this ship doing out here in the middle of a storm, in the middle of nowhere, off the coast of Portugal? How did he get rescued? And you came up with a great idea. Turns out that Bill Lawton, I mean, he's a bit of a villain. He was running guns, happened to pick Indy up. There's a whole backstory there too. How did this story develop? Was that the seed of the idea, and you just went from there, or so? How did this fantastic story of Sargasso Pirates develop?
Well, I mean, the seed of the story is in the title, Indiana Jones and the Sargasso Pirates, which is surprisingly similar to Terry and the Pirates, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really where it begins. It begins with me saying, I love adventure comic strips. I want to do my love letter to adventure comic strips. And so Indiana Jones and you want to slip in something that's a little unearthly. So the Sargasso Pirates, the Sargasso Seas, all the shipwrecks that are in there, I thought that would make a great setting for an adventure. Also, we hadn't seen Indy on the water a lot, so I thought that would be a little bit different. But then, then I just started looking at all the old adventure strips that I liked, and more or less picking and choosing the characters from them that I wanted to have a chance at working on. So out of Terry and the Pirates, I picked Burma, and I rename her Cairo.
Yes.
And I take the Dragon Lady, and I make her the Sea Witch. And the Sea Witch actually also has a little bit of a nod towards the Popeye villain, the Sea Hag.
Yes.
And out of Popeye, which I consider, I think the Thimble Theater that Seagar was doing was a great adventure strip. And so out of that, I pick Wimpy. And Wimpy becomes New Jersey
Jones. Yes.
And if you read...
Hey, I'm a Jersey boy myself, so I happen to have loved New Jersey Jones. I thought he was great.
Wasn't that line from Wimpy, though, too? In the
Yes. I mean, Wimpy had said back in the 30s, whenever anyone confronted him and he just kind of wanted to sidestep it, he would just go, Jones is the name. I'm one of the Jones boys. Wimpy said a million times in the 30s.
Yes. That's great.
It was tailor-made. It was tailor-made to drop into this series.
And I think Indiana, did you see it this way too, that Indiana Jones, I think almost, like if this were back in the, maybe back in the 30s or something, he would have been one of the comic strips.
He should have, yeah, exactly.
It seems like almost these cliffhanger things each week you could do that. It seems so appropriate, and the style that you did this, even in the first issue, just starting from the first issue, chapter 1. Talk a little bit about the intro to each comic book. How it's the style of the intro to each comic book. The splash page comes in, and it's chapter 1, A Watery Grave. And it's Indiana Jones, two-fisted archaeologist adventure, traveling the globe. And it's you introduce these characters right off the first page. It's like these little, you don't even get into the story. And it's almost like each one has that sort of comic strippy feel to it.
Or almost like a silent film, kind of depicting what's going on, or a newsreel.
It was so different than the other Dark Horse books.
It's amazing. I love that little touch.
Yeah, well, I will say those intro pages, which I don't remember really well, those were put together after the fact, because we didn't have splash pages, did we? Because I structured the book as a series of daily comic strips.
Yes.
So that every page is three exactly the same size tiers. Every 2 tiers is equal to 1 comic strip. So every double page spread is 3 dailies.
That's great.
Oh, so you designed it specifically to have the feel of a comic strip.
Yeah. If I've done my job right, and I work really hard on it, every 2 tiers is fairly self-contained and could have appeared as a daily. Okay.
Absolutely.
And once again, I was taking my cues from the old comic strips, because Roy Crane's Captain Easy, his Wash Tubs and Captain Easy, was drawn so that every day's strip was split exactly in the middle, so some newspapers could stack it as a square image or run it as a horizontal image.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And even every once in a while, you do have a splash page which could stand in for a Sunday. Like you have Leif Erikson's Axe, which is almost a full page. And you know how they did that with like Prince Valiant and stuff like that. Right. They would have like the half splash page and then a couple of little panels here and there. And that actually fits. It looks incredible.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. And, I was so obsessive about this. Once again, the rounded panel corners, that's because Captain Easy had rounded panel corners. And I did it on duotone paper because Captain Easy was done on duotone paper. And every so often I had captions which have like almost like newspaper headlines, Indy at sea,
yes,
blah, blah, blah.
Yes, I love that.
Indy trapped on icebergs, slowly
Exactly.
drifts south, melting, weeks pass.
Explosion rocks Sargasso. Silence follows desperate gambit. 30 minutes pass, 1 hour. It's great. It just it sets the tone.
What made you think that would work? Like, did you have to run that by anybody, like Lucasfilm, or did you just go, you know what, this is what I'm doing?
Well, I mean, I made no secret that I was doing my love letter to adventure strips, and I never ran into any problems that I can remember. Never. I worked with Lucasfilm, and it was very painless, quite honestly.
Wow.
No, and Diana Schutz was my editor. She was a great editor. She helped tighten up the script considerably because that was really one of my very first times scripting. So, every so often she'd go, this doesn't quite work here, blah, blah, blah. But that was just like normal, learning your craft stuff. I can't remember, I remember working, who did I work with at Lucasfilm? Her name was Lucy someone. I don't remember Lucy's last name, but she was great to work with.
Were there any rules from Lucasfilm? Because we hear that from creators all the time where, I mean, obviously, John Byrne like walked after 2 issues. He couldn't deal with it. And again, that's going back, a decade from that. But did you have any rules that you had to follow? Like, look, do whatever you want, but here's what we have to have Indiana Jones do.
I got a sheet of do's and don'ts, yes, from Lucasfilm about things that, like, for instance, his adventures had to be set somewhere in real history. And I researched the Normandy's cruise schedule to know that it would be in that spot in the Atlantic Ocean to pick up Indy at that moment.
Wow.
I did that research. So
that's why the story shines as much as it does, because you did the work, you did the research, and it shows. And it flows like a great adventure story. Everything works.
On the do's and don'ts, did they give you anything like do's and don'ts as far as like what Indy himself could do or what he wouldn't do?
I can't remember everything. I didn't save the sheet, and I wish I had. But I will say this, because I've mentioned this to many people since. One of the strong don'ts was you could not have any science fiction elements in the strip. Mystical was fine. Science fiction was totally forbidden. And
interesting.
Wow.
That's all I can tell you is I wish they had followed their own advice.
I was going to say, so no crystal skulls, no aliens, no space between spaces. Gotcha.
Wow, that is very telling. That is very telling. Wow. Can you talk about the 2 female characters that we have here? Because Keith and Keith and I have talked about this. I think, Keith and I we're of one mind where we're not so crazy about Indy dragging along a whole group of people with them, like this sort of entourage. We got the little bit of that in Crystal Skull. But boy, do we love him meeting up with these crazy characters as he gets to these areas, and maybe there's some backstory or some history to it. Keith, is that a fair assessment, do you think?
That is a fair assessment, absolutely.
Okay. Can you talk about our 2 female characters here? That because I think these are 2 of the most memorable female characters in any Indiana Jones tale.
Well, that's very flattering, but of course I can't take any credit. I mean, really, you're talking about.
Of course you can.
Burma. Anyone who knows the Terry and the Pirate books, probably their favorite characters are Burma and the Dragon Lady. I mean, there are so few cartoonists who can say they've actually contributed to the lexicon of the world at large. And the word Dragon Lady, people understand what that means without ever knowing about the comic strip, and that's that doesn't happen to a lot of cartoonists. So, but Burma is the perfect, you almost want to say hooker with a heart of gold, but she's not necessarily a hooker, but she's a shady lady, but she's basically a good gal,
It's definitely a femme fatale kind of.
Yeah, she's very much a femme fatale.
Yeah.
And and then you've got, the Sea Witch, you've got the Dragon Lady, and she's, the woman who wields power the way a man would, and in many ways, especially in the 30s, that's a very threatening character.
No Marcus, no Willie, no Marion. Was that in your mindset going into it of, I just want to drop Indiana Jones in this completely different environment and with nothing else around that seems familiar?
Well, I don't know how conscious that was. I certainly remember I was following the established pattern of the movies where there was a new gal every episode or every movie, which, my heart is with Marion also. So, or at least I should say my heart is with Marion. I think she and Indy make a great couple. So I was never happy that they kind of presented Indy as a playboy on that level. But that was what they were doing. And so that's what I did here too. There was no conscious effort to really, take him away. I mean, I was just telling the story, and I only had 4 issues, so I start with the iceberg and roll right. There's no time to get him back to the university and see Marcus, and it just didn't fit the story. It was not like I didn't want to do that or consciously avoided it. It just didn't fit the story. And I do have him talk to Marcus at the end. He's on the phone.
Yeah, he talks to Marcus at the end, which is great. It's almost a Marcus cameo. Maybe he was lost in his own museum for most of the adventure anyway. So, when I was going through the book, I have to say this reads very like now that you kind of made it clear that you laid it out like a strip. It read to me very cinematically, almost to a point where for this story I was kind of fantasizing who would be playing these characters had this been made into a film. And for Bill Lawton, I was kind of like Brendan Gleeson, and
great.
He would be great, right? And then for Seeger, I was like, well, of course, Ben Kingsley would be great in that. And I'm just going through it, and for Cairo, I came up with an idea as Catherine Zeta-Jones. I thought would be great in that role as well. But I mean, there's endless possibilities. Who would you like to see cast in the film version of Indiana Jones and the Sargasso Pirates?
Well, I haven't thought of that in a long time, and I certainly haven't thought about it in terms of modern actors and actresses. I mean, obviously, Cairo is Lauren Bacall, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, perfect.
So, but I do think Catherine Zeta-Jones is a very good choice because she would bring an exotic nature to the character, which I think would be great. Yeah. Exactly. So, although Catherine, she could also be the Sea Witch pretty easily too.
Oh yeah, the Sea Witch was. I was. Oh man, I don't know. The Sea Witch is such a great character. I was kind of wondering who would be able to pull that off. It's kind of a tricky. Tricky.
Yeah, character. I don't know. I have to say, I think you maybe are missing your calling if you're not a casting director, because I think it's really good calls here.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
What do you like most about Sargasso Pirates? Because obviously this is sort of your love letter to adventure strips and all these things. What's your favorite part of the 4-issue run?
It's hard to say. I mean, I like so much. I really enjoyed playing with New Jersey Jones. I just love the idea that there was this con man named New Jersey Jones, and I enjoyed the mostly. I don't know. I enjoyed it all. I really did. I will say one of the things that I was very tickled by was, like I said, the steamroller that was the death of Superman just overtook my life. And so I'd written all 4 issues and I'd started to pencil and lay out some, but it became clear I could not finish it. And so Diana said, we've got to wrap this up. I certainly understood that. And she said, what would you think if Ed Barretto came in and finished off the art? And I was like going, my God, what a great choice. It's like, you must be glad I can't draw this now. And Ed Barretto did such a wonderful job. But, he was handed the script and drew it beautifully. He did work off the layouts I had already started working on, but the end of it, I had not laid out any of it.
Okay.
And
that's what I was curious about, because there isn't that jarring moment we get when we switch artists that we see in some books. There is a flow to it. Do you sense that as well? And I guess that's because he's sort of working off your template.
Yeah, and he followed. He knew he had to follow the 3-tier formula. So, that once again, it isn't like we suddenly were getting these big vertical panels or anything. He knew that there was a look to the book to follow. And quite honestly, and this is what I'm getting to, is he clearly was a fan of Kniff's and adventure strips too, because at the end, when Cairo escapes, that's nearly word for word from Burma's first escape in the first adventure she appears in Terry and the Pirates. And I did not describe those panels. But when Ed drew those panels, he drew them exactly the same way Kniff drew those panels.
Oh, wow. So this is, you're under arrest, Miss Cairo. Will you go quietly?
Yes.
And then she's, I'll go, but not with you, and then takes the dive off.
Yes. That is word for word and almost and compositionally exactly like Burma's exit from
An homage.
Let us say an homage. Although my wife says, she's also an artist, and she says, lesser artists borrow, great artists steal.
But it all works for the world of Indiana Jones, too. You mentioned Superman. I want to segue into that. But before we go off of Sargasso Pirates, what did you think when you saw the covers? When did you first see the covers, and what did you think? Because this, to me, is one of the highlights of my collection. I actually got to meet Alex Ross and put this in front of him, and he says, I rarely get to see this book. Thank you for bringing it in, and he signed it. Can you just talk a little bit about the amazing covers that we get, two from Alex Ross, and then also Russell Walks on the last two?
Well, I thought all the covers were great, and it was, and all I can say is, it's a case of being in the right place at the right time, because I'm friends with Kurt Busiek, and at the time he was working on this book that hadn't come out yet called Marvels with this guy called Alex Ross, and I was going, gee, who can we get to do covers for Indiana Jones? He goes, well, maybe Alex.
Wow.
And at the time he drew, that's why he only does the first two. He painted the first two covers, and then of course I was swept up in Superman, and progress on Indiana Jones and the Sargasso Pirates really slowed to like nothing for a while. And by the time it picked up again, Alex was Alex, and Alex didn't have time to do two more Indiana Jones covers. And the last two are certainly, I think, really well done, and I could not be happier. But I wouldn't have wanted to follow in Alex's footsteps. But no, I think we have four really strong covers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, Bill Lawton was the captain of the ship that picked up Indy at the beginning of Last Crusade, got him back home safely. So was there ever another moment with Indy's adventures taking place in any of the movies, those background adventures that you would have liked to tackle? Because we all know the last Dark Horse Indy comic, Sargasso Pirates, was the last Dark Horse Indy comic until Crystal Skull, the film, was released. Were you planning to do more? Did you ever have any other ideas that were stemming from other adventure ideas in the films, or did you have original adventure ideas?
I can't say I remember anything in the films that I thought, oh yeah, I'd like to explore that more. Nothing comes to mind right now.
Okay.
I will say that I before I knew the limitations on Indiana Jones, I thought I had a really good idea for an Indiana Jones story, which was that Indy with some woman, it wouldn't have been Marion because that's not what they were doing at the time. He's at some site, and she is he's trying to open this like secret passage he's found, and she's translating an inscription that's carved into the rock, and she goes, I don't know, from what I understand here, it seems to be talking about something that happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And just then Indy opens up the secret door, and the Millennium Falcon is inside.
And
the droids would have been on there, and the droids would say things like, "You really remind me of this guy."
That's a good. And I just thought it would be funny. Impersonation, by the way. I think you got a career if Anthony Daniels ever retires as C-3PO. Hey, did you ever read that story of the Indy and Han Solo story, where Han Solo and Chewie crash land on Earth, and they get killed by Indians, and Chewie survives and becomes like the Bigfoot, and years later Indy and Short Round they discover the Millennium Falcon, and Indy says, "Oh, this kind of feels all familiar." Have you ever read that story?
No, where is this?
It's fantastic.
Hey Keith, I'm guessing that Carl may have had a drink with somebody at Dark Horse and may have told him this idea.
You told that story, and then that's where they went with it.
Yeah, Carl, did you happen to tell that story to somebody at Dark Horse at some point?
Oh, I'm sure I did. I mean,
I think they.
It was passed on to the Lucas people, who said no.
They did it. I think. Yeah, you may want to go back and retroactively check this one out.
Yes.
So you might have a check that's coming your way.
Because that was a great little story.
Yeah.
It was a great story. It's called Into the Great Unknown.
Well,
And it's just
Star Wars Tales 19, right?
19, that's right. It's a 10-page comic. It was written by W. Hayden Blackman. I don't know if you know him or
I remember now.
Okay, yeah.
And I will say, great minds do think alike. I mean, I'm not really upset here.
Sure, they do. I'm going to side with Carl on this one. I think he may have talked. Well, who knows? Look, I'm not trying to stir up trouble. I'm just saying it sounds like maybe you came up with the idea, but I don't know. Let's talk about that little time period there. How did so going to Superman, this is following the death of Superman. This is when you got to start working with Tom Grummett, creating the reboot of Superboy, Connor Kent. Connell. So going into that. So you were working on that and they said, well, we'll wait till you finish up with that and then do the indie, or like how did that 4-year span kind of, like, why did they wait so long?
Well, they waited so long because I kept saying, no, I really want to do it. I'll get to it. Okay. And, really got to the point where Diana said, look, we got to finish this.
Okay.
And
so they were being nice while you were doing this, but at some point they're like, we got to get this out.
Yeah. I mean, they were being angels about waiting, and they were much more patient than they had any right to be. And all I can say is, I will say I actually, sat there and considered maybe I need to buy, pay Dark Horse back for the investment that they paid me, and just call this a loss. But instead, Diana said, no, let's see if Ed Barretto can finish it.
Well, you know what? Let's call it even, because they took your Dark Horse story, your Millennium Falcon story.
Well, like I said,
can we call it a wash after all these years then?
I have no reason to believe that's what happens.
We're making things happen. We're fixing things here on the IndyCast all these years later. Look, we got you closed out the Dark Horse run with a fantastic miniseries. You got this partnership with Tom Grummett. We've got the rebooted Superboy. This kind of led you guys into a partnership for a lot of other things. Can you talk about what you're doing now? Because you're still working with Tom Grummett, and you're sort of bringing back a project that you gave to us in 2000, is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, Tom and I. It's weird with Tom. Very very early in my career, I remember I was up at the DC offices, and this editor who worked up there named Mark Wade. Mark said he was editing a book called Secret Origins, and he goes, "Carl, I got this guy, and I think you'd be a great inker on him." And it was Tom Grummett. He had been penciling a Secret Origin of Animal Man. And I was too busy at the time to ink it, but, Mark thought I'd be a real good match for Tom. And at the same time, I was very similar, very close in time. I was over at the Marvel offices, and there was an editor up there named Kurt Busiek, and he was editing a science fiction anthology called Open Space. And he said, "Carl, I got this artist I think you'd be a great match for. His name's Tom Grummett." And once again, I was too busy to help out at that point. But then fast forward a little while, I get hired to write Adventures of Superman, which happens to be penciled by Tom Grummett. And it just turned out that all of these people, Mark Wade, Kurt Busiek, Mike Carlin, they saw that we were a good fit, and they were really right. Tom and I are very simpatico. We have very similar ideas about what makes good comics. He constantly takes ideas in my head and makes them more dramatic and just more involving than I thought they would be. I've never enjoyed working with anyone more than with Tom. And so obviously we keep our partnership going as much as possible. And, in 2000, Kurt Busiek started up Guerrilla Comics, and he invited Tom and I to join, and we created a book called Section Zero, which was basically my chance to do something very much in the Challengers of the Unknown / Fantastic Four realm, which is, to me, both of those are really kind of adventure books with superheroic overtones. So that's what we wanted to do. And we came up with Section Zero, and we produced 3 issues for the Guerrilla Comics imprint, which was part of Image Comics. And then, unfortunately, at that time, I got divorced. And that really derailed my ability to work on create our own projects. I had bills to pay and blah, blah, blah. So we had to put that on the shelf. But we kept wanting to finish off and wanting to return to Section Zero. And finally, We tried to do it as a web comic, but we just couldn't do that. We talked to IDW, who was very interested in publishing it, but we couldn't make the money work because we had bills to pay. And finally, Kickstarter, like we said, we should try this Kickstarter thing. And we figured out how much money we needed to finish it off. And but we raised it. We raised enough money to finish it off, and now that's what Tom and I are doing. Tom is 10 pages away from finishing the pencils on this. I don't know, it's about 180 page in total Section Zero story.
Okay.
And
so are you springing directly out of the 2000 story? Is this sort of finishing it off and then maybe taking it in the next direction?
We will reprint the first 3 issues, and then there will be the equivalent of more than 3 issues of material, because the last chapter is 33 pages long.
Okay. When can we expect Section Zero? When can we look forward to this?
That's a good question. I mean, originally we thought we would have it out by the end of last year. I mean, we kickstarted it about exactly a year ago now. And I will say I'm the first to I will be the first to say that I did not expect the actual production of the pages to be a problem. Tom and I have produced hundreds of pages of comics together for monthly comics for decades and never had a problem. But unfortunately, Tom did have some deaths in his family and friends, and it really derailed him, quite honestly, much more than I realized for far too long. And he's back on his feet again, but it was a tough time for him. And beyond that, when you're working on a project that means a lot to you, you put a little more work into it. You spend a little more time on it. And we're doing that. And it shows. It's some of Tom's best work. I would even say the best work of Tom's entire career.
Wow.
There's a point where we have a scene, an extensive scene that takes place in a swamp. And as soon as I saw the first page, I said, Tom, we should have set this entire story in a swamp. This is so great. And also I have to say, when you're working on Superman or Superboy, there's a new issue that has to be out every 30, 31 days. And so there's a lot of times in this business that you spend sleepless nights making deadlines. Yeah. And when you're doing a creator-owned project like this that does not have that sort of hard deadline, it's very easy to say, it's 9 at night. I want to get a good night's sleep and call it a day as opposed to working until 2 or 3 in the morning. And so all of those things have unfortunately meant the timeline for their book has slipped and slipped and slipped. But like I said, Tom has 10 pages left to draw. He says he can finish that by the end of this month. I'm expecting maybe the middle of next month it'll be all done by.
Okay.
And so I'm hoping, knock on wood or whatever's around that's handy, that by September-ish, maybe October, we will actually have it printed and able to be in people's hands.
Well, the good thing about this is that whenever you have these creator-owned projects and you are taking your time on it, you can tell the passion is there. You can tell that you're putting everything you've got into this, and I think that comes across to readers, especially when we think about Sargasso Pirates. There's obviously the love for the characters that are in there. And speaking about Jones, we've got another superhero, Impossible Jones. Okay, so this is another creator-owned project that you've got working on?
It is another one. I mean, what it basically comes down to is Tom's speed was slow enough that I had time for another project.
Oh, okay. So you got to write a little bit more and get another one in.
And so I approached David Hahn, a friend of mine for many years, about doing a superhero book with him called Impossible Jones. And it's really we're just putting it together. We will eventually kickstart it, but this time I'm going to finish it. We're going to finish it before we kickstart it, so that the turnaround can be very quick. I think that's very important. And all I can say right now is, David coined the term that he says that this is a grin and gritty comic book, and our tagline for it is Impossible Jones, using her powers for good, not evil. Mostly.
Is that a 2018 possibility? Or maybe early 2019?
I would say we're probably going to kickstart it early 2019. Yes.
Okay, so we'll look for that. PanicButtonPress.com, that's where we go to find out more about all these projects?
Yeah, that's our home base for right now, for sure. And obviously, when we get ready for the release of the Section Zero book, I'll be doing a lot of posting on Twitter and Facebook to let people know, and same with Impossible Jones and stuff like that. So yeah, I can't seem to get away from the Jones name. It's a great name.
We don't want you to get away from it. Would Keith? I think we both would want to see Karl Kesel.
We want him to come back for Indiana Jones. Is what we want.
I mean, obviously Disney, Marvel. I mean, you know, they're going to be doing more Indiana Jones if they look. They've got to launch a new comic book, right? That's what we're thinking. Would you jump in on that?
You know, I will say, you know, I cannot name names, and this is really not anything near solid. But I was talking to someone who's a really great artist, and he has let Marvel know that he would love to draw an Indiana Jones series. And I said, if you need an inker, I will be there for you.
Oh wow!
Now, if that happened, that's a huge if.
Okay, now this is an artist, right?
Yeah,
and you would ink him, but you're also the writer of Sargasso Pirates.
In this case, there's another writer who has very strong ties to Marvel, who has been campaigning to write any Indiana Jones book they do.
So there are people out there that are campaigning for this already. We're sitting there talking about it like we'd love this to happen. Now there's people knocking
creative that wants to do it,
knocking on Disney and Marvel's door. That's great.
Come on, let's do this, people.
That's
come
fantastic.
on, we're waiting.
Can you imagine just seeing Karl Kesel again on an Indiana Jones book? It would be so cool if Kerry Gamble would get in on it. That would be cool too. I don't know if, by his own admission, I don't know if he could finish it on time.
Well, there is that. I mean, there is that. But no, now you guys probably know. I don't. Is there another Indiana Jones movie in the works?
Yes,
there is.
2020.
There is with Harrison Ford.
Yes.
Harrison Ford. They apparently have a script and a story ready, and in 2020, we're gonna see Indy 5.
Mr. Kesel, get your fedora inking skills ready. I would polish up on those.
Yes.
I tell you, Keith, this was fun. This was a fantastic way to celebrate our 7th anniversary.
Absolutely.
Karl, this is one of our favorite indie tales that we have covered here on Further Adventures, I can tell you that. So glad it worked out that you were able to help us celebrate 7 years of Further Adventures with you, Indiana Jones, and the Sargasso Pirates. Continued success. We're looking forward to these new projects coming out. Thank you so much for joining us today on the IndyCast.
Yes, thank you.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, man, was that a fun conversation? And I think, I don't know if we broke a little bit of news on the IndyCast today, but we got a little...
We broke a little news.
We took a little step further, I think, didn't we? That there are some discussions about a new Indiana Jones comic?
It's our anniversary, so we had to give something to you guys, and something big, right? This is a big anniversary for us. We had to have something big coming into this IndyCast. And come on, guys, some news. There's some stirrings of a new indie comic that could be coming very soon,
or at least the people want to be in on it. So yeah, nothing official yet, obviously, but it's nice to know that industry insiders are knocking on the door, going, "Hey, by the way, if you do this, I want in."
I mean, like I said in the interview, the fans want it. Creative people want to get involved with it. The desire's there. The fan base is there. We're waiting for it. Honestly, Joe, it's just a matter of time.
It is. And I look, as we go through, that was when the IndyCast started. It was like this big build-up to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and all these little things kept coming out. There's a little bit of news, and I think we're seeing it now. I think we're seeing this sort of Indiana Jones fever building up again as we go through. So it's just going to get better and better on the IndyCast. Absolutely. So my goodness, if you have not subscribed to the IndyCast by now, you've got to do it. If you're a new listener, welcome aboard. But Keith, the train's moving out. We are going to 2020 full steam ahead for Indiana Jones 5, and I think all of this stuff is just going to get bigger and bigger.
Absolutely. And since we've been here for 7 years, we might be here another 7 years if they do pick up another Indiana Jones comic book series. We will be here.
We'll have to check with Ed. We'll have to check with Ed. Make sure he's okay.
Review every issue, to interview the creators and the artists. We will be here for you guys as long as that book is here.
Even if it's just out on a street corner, just talking to the air. Even if there's no, we'll do it somewhere.
That's right.
So as long as there's Indiana Jones comics out there, we're going to be here.
That's right.
Okay, that's it for the day then.
All right, as Indy says, it is time for us to head on out of here. But we are not done with Sargasso Pirates just yet, are we, matey?
No, we are not, me mate, because the IndyCast will be taking a little bit of a break. But when our glorious leader and host, Ed, returns, we will be back as well with our review of Sargasso Pirates. And there's a little bit of a spoiler alert here, guys. we like it.
Yeah, we
and
do.
we might be heading back into the Raven's Nest with another special guest who, appropriately enough, often dresses up like a pirate.
Who could that be? Who could that be?
Who could that be?
I don't know. We'll see if we can work it out. Like, look, it's always depends on the Raiders' red line, right? We're trying to go from the United States to Austria to Australia. We're gonna try to belly up to the bar with Ed Dollista next time to see if it works out. Look, it's pirates, it's Ed. It makes sense, right? Do the math.
Rum, lots of
rum. Yes, lots of rum. And look, until then, be sure to get your thoughts to us on Sargasso Pirates. If you love the series, of course you do. We all love the series. If you want to send along your anniversary wishes to us as well, we'll read them on the show. Keith, where can they get in contact with us, and how can they check us out on social media?
Get in touch with us at thefurtheradventures@gmail.com. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook at The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones. Guys, we're going to have all kinds of cool new stuff uploaded on there by Karl Kesel. That artwork that we talked about, his first ever inking job, it's going to be up there. Come check it out. Give us a like. Send us some anniversary wishes. We love to hear from all of you.
Our review of Sargasso Pirates, and maybe, just maybe, a visit from that Australian pirate, Ed Dollista. That is next time on The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones.